former president himself is in Bedminster, New Jersey. Of course, there were huge crowds around Trump Tower yesterday. Those for the former president, those who were heckling him, but by and large, a pro-Donald Trump crowd that was gathering outside there yesterday. Bedminster, it's a little harder to do that. In the meantime, I do want to get the legal implications of all of this appeal process, the big July 11th sentencing date, only days before the Republican convention. We got Rebecca Rose Woodland here, New York trial attorney. Saul Wisenberg, the former deputy independent counsel, Fox News contributor. So, Saul, I ended with you. Interesting couple of pieces I've been reading on the prospect of appealing something like this. In New York appellate courts, though, I understand rarely do they overturn a jury decision without evidence of serious errors. So the obvious question to ask you, are there enough serious errors here to make an appeal and to make an appeals court go the other way?
Oh, I think there are very, very serious errors here, Neil. To begin with, the fact that Trump's lawyers really weren't given the actual theory, the actual facts about what other crimes. Remember, they had to prove that he falsified business records with the intent to cover up or commit other crimes. And they weren't informed of that, the Trump defense team, until right before closing arguments. That's a real due process problem, in my view. Also, problems with what the prosecution was allowed to argue. Basically, they were allowed to, in effect, argue that the guilty plea by Michael Cohen to election fraud and the non-prosecution agreement by David Pecker having to do with election fraud essentially meant that Donald Trump committed election fraud. Now, the judge gave an instruction that said you shouldn't consider that, but he allowed the prosecution to make what I believe are very improper arguments. So there are real issues on appeal. It is true both in the state and federal system that the overwhelming number of prosecutions are affirmed on appeal, but I think he's got some real issues.
All right. You know, Rebecca, on that, with the sentencing set for July 11th, only days before the Republican convention, can Judge Merchan actually seriously consider putting Donald Trump in jail, even briefly, while this is on appeal?
Well, jail is a possibility based on these 34 felony counts. I completely agree with Saul about the appellate process in New York. I've appealed many cases in New York. You go to the appellate division, then the Court of Appeals, and overwhelmingly the cases are affirmed. I believe in this matter, the fact that there is a cumulative effect of negative judicial action towards the defendant also will contribute to the appellate division possibly doing a review. Now, you have the appellate division, the Court of Appeals, and then if those appeals are exhausted, he can then, request the Supreme Court take a look at this based on the glaring constitutional errors and constitutional restrictions Donald Trump has faced. What we're looking at, though, on July 11th is possible fine, probation, or punishment in jail. Yes, and will this judge do it? We have seen him do so many outrageous, egregious things that even though the former president this is a nonviolent crime and he has no previous history of criminal activity, I do not know that Judge Merchan will take that into account. We don't know what we're going to get on July 11th because look at what we've gotten so far. We've gotten a case that no one was even apprised of the crime until the day the verdict sheet was read. This has been glaring constitutional error, glaring, ridiculous deprival of Donald Trump's constitutional rights. This has been a case where the law has been put together and stacked against him, almost like creating a Frankenstein monster. This is not law that New York has ever seen before in this way. So what will we see next? It's very hard to tell.
You talked of the possibility, Rebecca, there, the Supreme Court playing a role in this. So let me ask you a little bit about that. They generally try to run away from these sort of things. It's hard to see that happening now. It goes back to 2000 and the closeness of that race and the Florida recount, and all. I get it. Here, they've been involved already a number of times, and on something like this, could they take up a matter like this or say, no, let it play out in the lower courts?
Well, in the normal course of things, if former President Trump loses at the state appellate level, he can file a cert petition with the U.S. Supreme Court. Those are usually summarily denied. I don't know what they will do here. If the constitutional issues are important enough to them, they'll grant cert. But that takes a long time. The question is, can Trump and his team do something to get to short circuit that and get to the Supreme Court right away? And I think it's extremely unlikely. Now, if Judge Merchan, some people have suggested if Judge Merchan were to fashion a sentence or conditions of release that interfere with Trump's political campaign, that there might be a hook to take it to the Supreme Court. That is an extreme long shot.
Rebecca, for the time being, Donald Trump is a convicted felon. Now, whether that sticks, of course, to repeal, anyone's guess. A convicted felon normally cannot vote. Can Donald Trump?
Well, in this case, he hasn't been fully sentenced, but yes, he is a convicted felon. But he can run for office. So I think we should focus on the fact that he can run for office, and we are going to focus on the fact that he will stand up for his constitutional rights on July 11th. I agree with Saul that normal course of business requires the Supreme Court to even review once the highest court in the state has looked at the matter and adjudicated. There's a possibility, of course, that his team, Donald Trump's team, can appeal to the Supreme Court, given that this is a novel issue, that a president has never been convicted. We can see if the Supreme Court will take this up prior to exhausting all of the appellate process in New York, which Saul is right, it will take months and months for that to happen. If there is an issue during the sentencing on July 11th that would restrict his freedoms in any way, restrict his ability to campaign, is that an issue that the Supreme Court would see as something they should review on an immediate basis? We have no idea because we've never seen this before. Okay. We have really no idea what the process will be because we've never seen this before.
I understand that, but you didn't quite answer my question, Rebecca. Saul, I'll ask you, can he vote in this election? I mean, all the points you both eloquently mentioned. This is a first. I believe the first time we have a presidential candidate who can't go ahead and vote for himself. It is weird to me, but maybe that isn't the case. Is it the case? So,
I really don't know the answer to your question, and one of the reasons I don't know is I don't know that he has been convicted. Conviction is a term of art. For example, in the federal criminal system, you aren't convicted until you're sentenced. Okay. So I also don't know what the New York law is on whether felons can vote. So I would assume, without having done the research, that he can't vote. But again, it's kind of irrelevant because he can run and he can hold office, as you and I have talked about before.
Absolutely. And he's galvanizing others to vote for him right now, regardless of whether he ultimately can or cannot. And that, of course, has resulted in raising a whole bunch of money, better than $53 million, almost $54 million. I'm sure a lot more than that, because that was money that was raised in the first 24 hours after these guilty verdicts came down. Guys, I want to thank you very much. We're going to be exploring this much more in the donor aspect, the money aspect, what Joe Biden is hoping to do or captivate and seize on this.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.